Introducing the show, Living as a Modern Indigenous Soul, Part 3, the Tzutzihil Maya, an Indigenous Perspective. The Tzutzihil Maya have been in existence for thousands of years. They have been influenced both by their local group that has developed for thousands of years. They were also influenced through the ancient Maya that also migrated from Copan in Honduras and also through Mesoamerica from central Mexico. So the Tzutzihil Maya of today, in their root structure, their indigenous structure, became a blending of these three groups into a unique language that they hold and that they still speak today, especially in the living of life in relationship between the physical and the non-physical and the human and the non-human life. What we would term as a shaman, for them, this individual is a ritual communicator. Shamanism, the ritual communicator, is different than the traditional forms of shamanism, even included in all of the modern Mayan groups along with the ancient Maya. For there is a great academic debate over the last 10 years, is Mesoamerica, and specifically the Mayan, a true shamanic group? Because they do not leave to go into the other world and travel into the other world and communicate what they do in the other world itself and then come back with the vision. For the Maya had what they called their temple houses of the mat. Today, in the modern Maya, they also work with the structure of the mat. It's a weave structure that is the composite of the weavings of, comes out of the primordial sea, that comes out of the lakes, that is weaved together into a physical mat where I, as the individual, as the shaman, invite and collaborate with the nawals, the term that the Tzutzihil uses to describe the non-human and the human aspects that exist in this subtle world context. The subtle world for the Tzutzihil Maya is called Elbar. It's a place that exists in the physical world, but it is also a place that exists in the non-visible world. An individual that enters Albar may see the physicalness of the landscape in one dimension, but also perceives the other landscape in the invisible world, and how the visible and invisible, the human and the non-human, all work together. One of the most difficult tasks that were there for me as I first went into my exposure with them and then my own training is I would always say, well, what is the rituals that we do for humans? What are the rituals we do for the land and the agriculture? What are the rituals we do for animals? And eventually I finally got it, because in my training, in my academic pursuits, I saw a separation between these components and how it is the same ritual that if we are doing for a human being, it is affecting the land and the earth, it affects all of the environmental structures that are there, it affects the plants and the animals. When we are doing rituals for the agricultural, it has an effect on human nature. There is no separation, as I talked about in part 1. It is called living life. Anything and everything around us holds a interconnection and a wholeness between the visible and the non-visible, between the human and the non-human, even though everything has a different function of how it communicates at the core of being in Gaia, on the earth itself, brings us into a new way of perceiving the true livingness that's here. Many of the images in the Zutze-Heel tradition have outwardly today come out of the context of Christianity and Catholicism because of the time of the conquest and over the next several hundred years to maintain their physical existence of human life and the integrity of living human life to what their potential is. They had to let go of many of their images and many of their cycles of rituals that were inherent within them, that tied back to thousands of years of the Maya and the ancient Maya and Mesoamerican traditions. Initially, I thought, and many of the academics have written about this, that they have lost the essence, they have lost the outer structures, and their temple houses, or what they have called their Cofradia houses, are representative of Catholicism. But in each image that may look like a Catholic image, a non-indigenous image, it is always dressed in the Zutze-Heel tradition in modern Zutze-Heel attire that goes back thousands of years in history. And it also that there is a secret that is placed inside of each one of these objects that have its relationship to Albar. It has its relationships to the Nawals and the Marias and the Martins, the very invisible forces that are human and non-human that are there, that draws that energy and that consciousness and that awareness into what looks like a Catholic statue, but has a totally different feel and presence and communications that's different than Catholicism. And even in their ritual cycles and structures, although it has been dismantled, when we look at the 365 days of the solar calendar, and we look at the various cycles within that, cycles have been broken up so that they are in parallel to Catholic cycles. And yet when you look at the totality through the solar year and the other cycles of the lunar year and the 20-day cycles, they are uniquely different, and they are feeding and growing a radically different relationship than Catholicism. A perfect example of this is on what we would say is Good Friday, when at noon there is the focus on the crucifixion of the Christ figure. In the Zutze-Heel tradition, there is a figure that is raised, but it is not a crucified Christ, but rather it is the living tree of life that is raised, recentering the world to allow the invisible forces of human and non-human to enter through this figure. This figure of the Christo figure has flowers growing on it. It has flashing lights and music of celebration pouring off of this figure. It is anything but the sadness of crucifixion, but rather it is the aliveness of new potential and new possibilities that is emerging. So what Catholicism and Christianity looks as the cycle of Holy Week, so that on Easter Sunday there is a resurrection. From the Zutze-Heel tradition, this cycle is not a preparation for crucifixion, but is a preparation to allow the invisible living forces of Albar, human and non-human, to fully enter into the world for the next several days, to communicate more directly and more alive with every human being, with every object of nature, with every object of plants and animals, with everything that exists on the earth. A totally different form of separation. So in their temple houses, they hold presence and energies from the subtle world that assist people to find the potential behind academics, behind education, the potential of wisdom in learning, the potential of wisdom in our laws, the potential of wisdom in our good medicine, the potential of wisdom that exists in relationships to the work that we do, the wisdom that exists in the relationship to our creativity, the wisdom that exists in the relationships that we have within the family, the wisdom behind birth and children emerging into the family, into the community, into the tribe. Every aspect of living life is covered within their temple houses and the landscape around the community that is ritualized to communicate the potential and wisdom that exists to bring wholeness and connectivity between the non-human and the human, between the visible and the non-visible worlds together. Not in the sacrifice of the individual, but raising the energy, the light, the vibration to wholeness to the community, to wholeness to Gaia, to the wholeness of the earth itself, and how the potential exists to bring about what is possible to deal with the crops, to deal with problems, to deal with law, to deal with finances, to deal with commerce, to deal with professions and community and relationships and family and any aspect that is there in living life. It's why I became so involved in and in the journey of that, have become an elder and have taken on several different positions within their community. And the key position that I established, that have been initiated into this year, as being the primary caretaker of the generative force of life that comes through the Martine bundle for them, of all the energies of everything that exists around us. This is the living nature as a modern indigenous soul, and we are all capable. It's inherent in us as a human being to be able to have different qualities of communication and awareness, so wisdom prevails into the wholeness and the connectivity to grow the individual, to grow the tribe, and bring a cooperative nature together of potential for all and everybody and everything on the earth of Gaia, or from their perspective, Nawal Skirment.